On this episode of the Layover Live, Eric Rankin stops by to talk data privacy. Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 148 of the Layover Live, where we bring you the top article from the Layover each week. I'm Jason Swick, VP of Strategy and Insights at SimpleView, and I hope all of you are having a great week and are off to a wonderful start for your new year. I know I am. So hopefully we've turned this chapter and we're starting to see some light at the end of the tunnel of hope, right? Now, our episodes this month are really been focused around preparing for the road ahead. As we mentioned back in June of 2020, we talked about presenting a four-phased approach to how we thought this would play out, right? First was kind of this destination maintain, where we held on for a few months. We then moved into phase two, which happened during the summertime, which was kind of living with COVID, but kind of getting back to marketing a little bit, starting to see some travel return back to our destinations. And then into the summer of 2021, we're going to be moving from phase two into phase three and beyond. So we wanted to make sure that we had this approach set up for you. Last week, we had Aaron and Evan on to discuss what 2021 might look like and some tools that you can use to help all of you out there really start to prepare and determine when travel search demand returns for your particular area. And today we are going to continue that theme by looking ahead to data privacy in the new year, which is something that's really important. Now, new platforms combined with momentum in new privacy regulations, as well as the concept of even like data as a service, have made data a really hot topic as of late. So with that, I wanted to bring in our product and data compliance expert, Mr. Eric Rankin, who is our Vice President of Product Development at SimpleView. So Eric, welcome to the show.
Hey, man, thanks for having me.
Yeah, man, we haven't had you here for a while. It was, we caught up a little bit before the show, so it's always good to see you. You always have really, really good insights. And again, if I think of experts in the space who really know their stuff around compliance and data privacy, Eric, you're one for that. And as we talk about this, before we get into it, I mean, when we're looking at data, it really forms the foundation for any organization's success, as it provides invaluable insights that eventually inform our action. As the space continues to grow, data privacy, data storage, analytics tracking, all of these things need to be top of mind for destination marketers to succeed. Now, our article of the week this week is a perfect fit to speak to much of that, and it comes from Forbes.com, and it's titled Looking Ahead to Data Privacy in 21. Now, the article makes some pretty good predictions for this year, including the emerging of new data management models, the concept of data as a service, and also evolving data privacy laws around the collection and storage of data, which is kind of what I want to lead into, Eric, and jump right into it with this first question for you. Because there has been a lot of talk about data privacy, especially over this last year, which you've been all over it. What has changed then with privacy laws, maybe in the last year? Maybe speak to that.
Yeah, sure. Well, we can sort of go backwards. Happy New Year, everyone. Clearly, anyone been in this sort of political in the global context, right, is that obviously, Brexit finally took place literally on December 24th, and, the UK left the EU. So, going back to talking about GDPR, right, of course, now that UK's left Europe, they are no longer part of that organization, as well as the EEA or the other European nations that weren't part. So now they're sort of an island, is one example. So, right, the bridging mechanisms put in place literally on Christmas Eve are still fresh off the press, and there's been a 6-month extension given for those protocols to sort of behave for at that level. So internationally speaking, it's continued to grow through Latin America. Brazil just had their law passed this last year as well. The U.S. is still sort of wrestling with it, although many states, 11 states have stuff on the books. Mainly California, everyone's familiar with CCPA and CPRA that got updated. Nevada passed a law. Maine's got a law. So there's quite a bit going on in the world of compliance and privacy and tracking. All this is really predicated on, on the data collected about your consumers, your visitors, your possible, business partners, et cetera, that needs to be managed. So really, the laws are continuing to grow, and it's really a mouthful for people to sort of keep up with those topics as it relate to where and how you do business, right? About what's collected. So it's staying abreast of that, I think, is important, and understanding, what areas that you need to be involved in to pay attention to, because it's such a broad topic. I think is important. To your question, really about what should they look at? The big one is obviously collection, and we'll talk more about that, I'm sure, later. Is that what just looking at all the data you do collect, where it comes from, what it's about, and how much you've got, I think is important these days, because clearly, to your point about data insights and decision making, it's very important to run your organization and have that information so you can do good work with the time and money that you have. But conversely, of course, it's also a liability. Is that if you've got a lot of that stuff sort of laying around and you're not sure what to do with it, or you've completed the work with what you have, is probably not keeping it very long, right? Because it just puts your business in a risk position where if that information is compromised or it gets in the quote unquote the wrong hands, that could blow back on the organization. Nobody likes that. So it's important that you do know what you're doing with the stuff that you do want to get and what it's for. It's a data-driven and purpose-driven collection. You take actions with that information. Now, you may want to keep some historical information so that you can look at it later on. But usually, if you do aggregate roll-up type information, it's less specific, and you can still use it, for many, many years safely, right? But keeping too much laying around and not a good place can cause you some problems.
Yeah, no, all good points, Eric, and since you've been working on this for a long time with us, and are really knee deep in a lot of these things and have a deep understanding of this, and these are things you've been really evangelizing at different levels for years now, right? Because it's not something that we can ignore anymore. It's something that we have to be mindful of, right? As the world's changing. And it's changing not only on the technology side of the house, and how we collect data and do all that, but it's also changing for marketers, right? A lot of the marketing tools are starting to change too. I mean, we think about the death of third-party cookies coming in 2022. That's been a hot topic as of late as we start to think about that. iOS 14 update that's coming, right, with the battle that Apple and Facebook are having over those things. And we're even starting to hear the new acronyms come to the party, things like IDFA and AAID, all these different things starting to show up around privacy. And this is certainly going to affect a lot of DMOs out there, especially those that are placing heavily a lot of their media on networks that use a lot of these type of cookies for tracking. So as it relates maybe to this deprecation of cookies, how can DMOs prepare maybe for that? Maybe give some insights into that a little bit.
Yeah, no, that's a great question, Jason. And I think, before privacy really started to explode, like I said, in the last probably 5 years, and where, accountability is what, the world is demanding accountability at all levels of actions that people and businesses take. And certainly cookies and that behavior is no different. So, I think organizations, first and foremost, as you make your investment, as you work with other agencies to sort of get these buys done, it's time to get a little bit deeper in those actions, where people can't be ignorant of the law any longer. Is sort of like, what is being placed? How do they behave? What is needed for those placements to take place accurately and collect that information? Then what information is actually being collected, right? It's one thing to sort of place ads and sort of win on a campaign and get conversions. But the reality is, like, the real success and detail is what were those cookies telling you, and what are those measures, right? It's not just about pixels firing off, so to speak, right? It's about the return trip. So getting more intimate with sort of what they are and how they behave, I think, is of critical importance for those to understand. And certainly, on the legal side, protecting oneself is, you should be reviewing your agreements with your advertisers, placement folks and agencies around what they are doing for you, what they're responsible for, and what liability and position that puts them or you in these agreements. Because again, the way the law works now, it sort of goes all the way through the chain. No one's off the hook there. So I think that's immensely important to understand and know. Do you have what you need, and don't do more. To the point of third party, which is quite interesting, right? I mean, if you look at, again, Google, Facebook, Apple, the big guys, as this world's become more litigious, and as the exposure and risk of, again, these cookies and this privacy data sort of has enveloped that conversation, is that, they are looking at ways, and why the third party, topics coming up is because it's sort of outside their environmental control, right? So there are solutions coming in the future. Clearly this year will really there'll be a turn, I believe, in the sense of how third parties can evolve in a different way, and that the big players are going to provide a solution that may provide some kind of, we'll call authentication that they have control over to sort of better protect and manage that. Whereas, third parties, just like it sounds, right? It's sort of one length too far away from them as well. And because they're culpable and responsible on top of it, they can't sort of plead ignorance any longer. And a lot of these big privacy laws exist because they were geared towards, right, Facebook, Google, and others who have, as we know, some of them have, of course, taken some liberties, essentially had some breaches of short that have caused some pain to consumers. And these laws are designed to hold that accountability. So as an advertiser and work with agencies, it's good to sort of get familiar with that information, understand what you're doing, and also make sure what your exposure is. What is your risk, right? It sounds scarier than it is in some cases, but you need to know that stuff these days. You can't just sort of, get away with not paying attention, I guess.
Yeah. Good points. All there, Eric. I think, as it relates to ad cookies, I think, again, talking with your agency about the approach that they're taking, as it relates to like Google's, the Facebooks and Apples of the world, which you mentioned, they are not going to cut their revenue streams in half without having a solution. So between now and next year, there'll be some solutions that'll come up. If you're placing buys directly, these are things you're probably not going to have to be concerned with at all. But they're going to find better ways to track things with more transparency for the end user, which is important. But to your point, we can't ignore these things anymore. I think, as I was prepping for the show and doing some research to talk with you, I think I was reading some stats from the UN that talked about 66% of countries now have some sort of data privacy laws now in place, and that's only going to grow. And that number has been growing. So these are things that we have to pay attention to and keep an eye on moving forward. But, it also then reminds me that we should be putting the utmost importance on our first party data, right? So things like in your CRM, your email list, these are things you should be really treasuring and holding on to. And when I mean treasuring, I mean make sure the people you are sending messages to want your messages, and that, leveraging that first party data, getting their information so you can use it from other marketing activities. First party data that lives inside your CRM is going to be probably now more important than ever. So, in some of that, I think, Eric, a good pivot then would be advice, and something we like to ask of all the guest hosts on here. Maybe what advice do you have for DMOs in this area so they can be prepared for 2021?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. In general, I think, if I had to sort of narrow it down to say sort of three key ones, I think the first one, which is the least exciting and sort of nobody likes to do, right? But it's that, somewhere on your domain, whether it's your own web, if you've got a web presence, or you have, if you're part of a state or local entity, but your privacy policy and all those disclosures about everything that you're doing should be publicly available and transparent. And that does, cover a lot of bases, right? And for starters, and again, as we know, one of the things in there is listing sort of, where you have cookies and what they do and what they track, right? And a great experiment, that sort of, as you go through that process, you do start to realize sort of what you have or don't have, right? And you take that inventory. I think that's really important and provide some good confidence. And again, that exposure, transparency about those things provide consumer confidence, because most people read those at a level now these days. And they're typically okay. Once they read what's in there, they're okay with it, and then doing what they need to do on a site, or going where they want to go and getting information that they want to get in exchange for what you're requesting. And I think that's important, just to sort of have that mutual understanding. So that's a good one. And, they don't have to be super crazy. There's some good baseline stuff out there that you can put out, and it just provides a little comfort and confidence to it. I would say the second thing really then is just, as you mentioned, Jason, first party data is the most important. I mean, you've spent a lot of time and money as an organization to select and curate that. And it, to your point about its value, right? It's probably worth, a ratio of at least, I'd say 3 to 1 to 5 to 1 in value of anything else, because that's where the rubber meets the road. And those are the actual, the human contacts that you've made. They're going to interact and work with you, right? So it's important to sort of have and know those things and really cultivate that further through those actions, as well as ensuring that you've got the quality of it. And if you don't know what to do with it, or it doesn't provide value any longer, like I said, just have a good storage and retention policy, and just get rid of it, right? And the third one really would be, how do you stay up on this stuff? I know a lot of people are like, hey, Eric, this is all cool and amazing, but it's really heady sometimes. And when you're, if you're a marketer, you've got lots of other stuff on your plate and trying to do your job, and getting into legal mumbo jumbo is probably not the last thing that you want to do.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
a couple of great sources out there. One, dimension that you brought up about what's going on in the world and who has laws and policies. DLA Piper, which is one of the largest global web firms in the country, legal firms in the country, in the world really, has a great website. And on that site, they have a page that's very well curated and managed by all their attorneys around the world. That shows in a heat map severity levels, et cetera, about who has privacy laws in what countries and how restrictive they are, including a very high level but detailed enough synopsis that explains about the law in very layman's basic language. And it's updated constantly. So it's a really, and it's free. So it's a really good source that you can go out in one spot and look at any country in the world, or any state for that matter, and see what's going on. And it saves you a lot of time. So that's a good one. And the second one really is the IAPP, or the Industry of Association for Privacy Professionals. As you'd imagine, like any other organization, there's lots of people out there that's a full-time job for them. And membership's not much. I think it's about $200 or $300 a year to be just a regular member. And it's packed with information, newsletters, and other information that relates to anything about privacy, data privacy, whether it's cookies, it's data transfers, it's state level stuff, what you should collect and not collect, and what you can or can't do. And it's interpreted very, very well by a massive body of experts. That's put also in very succinct language and keeps you up to date on what's going on. So even if you're within your own state or surrounding states, countries or regions in which you work, you can sort of see what's going on and sort of be ahead of it. And they do track everything from what ideas are even proposed bills that might be on some legislature floor, and even if it makes it or it doesn't make it. So you can see if things are successful or don't get passed. And so it really gives you a proactive stance about what's going on in general, to tie in with all the larger announcements that you read about Google, Facebook, and others in the news, where sometimes they don't jive, right? So this gives you a way to reconcile those things. And again, very little time and effort to spend on it, gives you a quick synopsis, and you can kind of get back with your day.
Well, Rankin, that's great, because, that was going to be my next question to you, was going to be about, hey, how about some resource you can share? Because I know this is a world that you've played a lot in. Those are really, really good resources, right, to be able to check what's happening, and also to have some references as it relates to privacy policies, which is a question that we get asked about all the time, right? Like, hey, is there any examples out there? What can I be doing? Is there anything else that we might be able to share on that side? I think is something that comes up all the time for us. And then just leveraging your normal partners out there. I know, I'm thinking of people like Odara. They've done a really good job as of late talking about data privacy as it relates more to like programmatic media buying and cookies and things of that nature, which are a little further downstream than some of the things you're talking about. There's really good stuff. And I imagine as the year plays out and we get closer and closer to cookie deprecation, this is going to be something that's going to come up even more. So yeah, really, really good stuff, Eric. Anything else to add?
I guess something I wanted to just worth mentioning, and again, for our space, and a lot of our customers, it's smaller, but it's probably noteworthy, because a lot of these other laws and sort of concerns come around with cookies, as well as sort of data brokering, right? As people buying and selling and trading information. So
yeah.
Most organizations we work with, of course, don't sell their stuff to somebody else. But there's still opportunities where you're buying it, right? So there's that, know what you're buying, where it came from, who it came from, and how it was acquired, right? Because in some cases, there can be some activities that are less than desirable there, and now you're part of that process. So, and if you go buy information or go buy profile data about a consumer base, just along those lines, again, just do the research, do the homework on how it was acquired, where it came from, and that you're allowed to get your hands on it, and you can use it in the way you choose to use it. A lot of times people, can innocently get their hands on some lists and fire some stuff off, and then they get a bunch of flack from that, right? Because they weren't aware of, they just set off some activity they didn't know. So just something to be cautious there these days in the day of buying, selling, and brokering data as well, because there's a lot of information out there that can be purchased.
Yeah, Eric, really, really good advice. That's why I was really looking forward to having you come on and talk about this stuff. I know it's been a while, man. I can't thank you enough for coming on and sharing this stuff, and look forward to being able to see you again soon. So hopefully sometime in the office, man. So good seeing you.
Yeah, it's great seeing you guys, and wish everyone stays happy and healthy. And yeah, look forward to seeing you in person in the new year.
Yep. us as well. So yeah, thank you so much. And thanks for tuning in each and every week. If you're not subscribed, please do so now. We're also available on Spotify and iTunes if you want to consume us through audio podcast. So thanks for tuning in, everyone. We'll see you next time and have a great day.